Okay. All right. Hello, everybody.
Hello everyone in your different time zones around the world. I'm talking to you from sunny Turin, inside a gold-coloured uh, big box, the portal, and we're here to discuss this subject and have a conversation about growing gardens as a revolutionary act. Now, why and how communities transform food deserts into food sanctuaries is one of the things we're going to be discussing. But I need to make a quick confession that a few years ago, the title of this conversation, Growing Gardens, is a revolutionary act. I would have been skeptical. Gardens seemed to me to be very far from the food front line, small, fragmented in many cases, difficult to make an impact on the way the world produces food and eats and what our diet should look like, easily dismissed as places of private contemplation and retreat. So in this conversation, I'm going to explain how my thinking changed, or more correctly, who changed my thinking. And in the conversation that follows, I want other people to be inspired the way I was and to understand how gardening can make an impact and why it can help, for example, save biodiversity. And perhaps most important of all, what can people do if they're listening in on this conversation, if they want to join the revolution? And to do this, we're going to be hearing from different experiences in different parts of the world, insights from our panelists who are going to come from Berlin, Stockholm, France. But let's start with downtown LA and the person who changed my mind and did make me think that growing gardens is a revolutionary act. Hi, Ron.
How you guys doing? That's South Central LA.
South Central, sorry, South
Hey,
Central.
don't get that twisted.
Sorry.
How you doing this morning?
And for people who don't know your story, because I heard you talk in Copenhagen a few years ago, and it blew my mind, and as I've mentioned in my introduction, completely changed the way I think about growing food and gardening. So I just want you to, for people who don't know the story, how did it begin, and what does the project look like in 2022?
Thank you. How did it start? Well, it started from a need of having healthy food around. I mean, people call them food deserts, places you can't get no food, but I say you can grow food in the desert if you know how. I call them food prisons, and they're by design. Once you realize that, you leave outside the parameters of your neighborhood, and all of a sudden, there's avocado toast when you think about it, and and there's smoked salmon everywhere, and there's beautiful flowers, and there's tree-lined streets. You realize that that's by design. And so I'm a designer. So I'm like, okay, we're gonna have to change the design over here. And you could not go anywhere to get any healthy food. There was fast food everywhere. Every corner they had a fast food joint, or the bodegas, or the liquor stores, that had, the bologna right next to the 40-ounce, beers. So it's a cesspool of food, and I decided, no, we got to change this, and then I got an arrest warrant issued for me.
Where were you growing the food?
I was growing it. I actually, right now we're in my swimming pool. Okay, this is which is my office. Okay, so it's I was growing it on the street. Outside of on the property. We have these things called parkways. It's like before you get to the street, there's this grassy, area, and it can be, 10 inches, and it could be, some of them could be 10 feet wide, perfect to grow food. And so I got this warrant for planting food on the street, like cutting it short. But that was a fight, and I wound up getting the law changed in LA where you can plant food on the parkways. The city hasn't really done any advocacy work behind it. They haven't done any workshops, or most people in the city don't know that you can plant on your parkway. So that's some work to do. But yeah, it's my whole thing with that was showing, wow, you don't have a problem if somebody's throwing couches and toilets and trash, on the street, but all of a sudden you have this guy comes by and he's growing corn and basil and tomatoes and beautifying and beautiful flowers, and I have banana grove on the street.
And what did this create for the community, in terms of people who are walking by and noticing these different plants and this food growing? What did it become for the community?
It created a mind shift of possibilities, because we think these spaces, they're designed a certain way, and we don't realize that all of us are creatives, all of us are designers. And so if something's not work, you change it. If it doesn't fit, you change it. So people, once they saw what I had done, that gave their brain the possibility of changing how they were thinking, and like, oh, okay, this is possible. I could do this. And it happened. Not only in LA, it happened all over the world. And it's happening all over the world, where people are taking these spaces and realizing that could be food. We can't eat no damn grass. We're not cows. So it's
and from that, and from that point of being at risk of prosecution or being prosecuted, what has it become in 2022?
It's become just what it started out as the beginning. It became my march. It became my symbol of revolution. It became my solace. It became my peace. It became a mission to change people's DNA and change the way people think, because there is no damn, think outside the box. Let's start here. There ain't no damn box. Let's just think, because if you're thinking in a box, that means your brain has only a limited capacity, just like a plant. When you put it in a pot, the roots want to grow, but we're not allowing them to grow because we have them confined. Let's not confine our brains.
Yeah, but you're changing the way people think. Have you changed, do you think, the way people eat?
Yeah, I've changed the way people eat, because I tell people growing your own food is like printing your own money. Yeah, growing your own food can be expensive, but people it's changing. When you figure you're changing your community, you're changing the way people think. It's not just about money, and that's what people are like. Oh, that's stupid, changing. But it's people. Again, you have to expand your mind. So yeah, I am changing people's perception of where food can come from. I had a guy just the other day. I was in San Francisco, and he said, "I got a problem with you." I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, my wife watched your master class, and she's into plants now." And so I come home one day, and he says, she took my underwear drawer and threw my underwear on the bed, and it wasn't even folded. And he says, it's on my Instagram, it's funny as hell. And he says, and she took the drawer, and now she's got plants growing in the drawer. So he says, you owe me an IKEA drawer, dude.
Great. At this point, can we please bring in Patrick Venucci, aka Frenchie Gardner, who's based in Berlin. Hi. And then you've just been listening to Ron's story and this, I guess, revolutionary act of taking the plants outside and confronting people with food and growing food. You've embarked on a project in which, from a relatively small space, a balcony, you're reaching the world through Instagram, more than 150,000 followers. So just tell us a bit about your story and how does it connect with Ron's?
Sure. Firstly, thanks for having me. And basically my story is I'm a citizen, of this world, and I've worked all my life in marketing in big companies, Ubisoft, PlayStation, Netflix, and recently I decided to change my life and become an urban gardener, because basically I'm creating content and I'm writing books to educate people on the fact that you can grow your own food even on small spaces and even on containers. And for me, this is extremely important, is to convey basically the back to the roots, you know, like the back to the essence of nature. And even if we live in urban areas, even if we live like in crowded cities, welcoming back nature into our life is super important, and it has like so many benefits. And to be honest, when I was in my journey, you know, at Netflix, I realized, yeah, I have no passion in my life. I'm working all day, like even during the weekend, I have no passion. And when I randomly bought some seeds, some soil, and some pots, and just started on the go, I asked after like some questions to myself. I was like, how is it possible that I'm so ignorant about how to grow food? Like at school, nobody taught me, like there were no course, you know, on growing your own food. So that's why now I'm trying to share my experience, basically.
And can you give people a sense of this journey? Because they really need to take a look at what you do on Instagram, because wonderful images. But can you describe where you started and what you are now growing?
Sure. I started with throwing some lettuce seeds in a pot. Not sure if one lettuce seeds would give birth to a lettuce. I was like, yeah, maybe I have to put more of them, you know, like, and I started like this. And like, if you scroll down, you know, to this first picture of like, I don't know, 20 small lettuce in a small pot. Basically, I learned a lot, you know, and I was inspired, of course, like by Ron's story. I was inspired like also through social media by a lot of gardeners around the world. And I quickly realized that there is like such a beautiful community, and that's why I love social media. When you use it smartly, you can connect with so many people. And I think, you know, like in 3 years, I learned how to grow food. I learned that in small containers and small spaces, you can fully grow your own food. And on top of that, you can really reuse urban resources, even in cities, to nourish your soil. And for me, this is the most important thing, you know. So the journey really evolved from a traditional container gardener trying to grow some plants, and now I'm really like trying to open our eyes, you know, on urban resources, on soil health, on welcoming biodiversity, flowers, insects, even on a small balcony, and it truly works.
And I mentioned when I introduced Ron that I was a skeptic, that I felt this is so small scale, private spaces, fragmented. Can it really make a difference? What's your answer?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think my answer on that would be that if I look, you know, at my small balcony right now, if I look at all these empty rooftops in the cities, I think like from a small scale, you can really develop that into a larger scale. And I think that the revolution of growing in gardens, for me, it's starting to be a great and also a smart disruption, redefining the lines of our society. Because if you think about it, you know, like even on my small balcony, I start to grow food in a few pots. Then you reconnect with seasons. You reconnect with the food that you have in your plate. And then when you taste homegrown food, and even more when it's made by you, the gardener, of course, like the taste is great. So you don't want to go back, you know, to the supermarkets, you know, to buy basically like these empty products that are like without taste, without nutrients. So it's disrupting the food industry, but after it's also disrupting the seed industry. Because when you learn about heirloom seeds and hybrid seeds, that heirloom seeds are a gift from nature that you can reproduce like endlessly, you know, like thousands of seeds by yourself that are adapted to your climate. And that after you discover hybrid seeds, you're like, I don't want to grow hybrid seeds that I have to buy again, and again. And on top of that, I don't have the same choice of varieties. So there is a disruption of the food industry, of the seed industry, and also it's awakening, I would say, like the collective mindset around climate change. Because if you grow your food, you need to water your garden. If there is no water anymore, then you have to find solution about how to save water, how to collect rainwater. And I think this is like, in this way, for me, it starts small, but in the end, it spread a huge revolution.
Yeah. Brilliant. I want to bring Katja, Jassey of Stockholm Allotment Gardens into the conversation now, because in a way, Katja, you are part of a more traditional system from the outside looking in that in the UK, for example, we have allotments, which we've had for more than a century, of these public spaces where people can grow. And that's similar to what you have been doing in Stockholm. But you've gone further and you've looked into more kind of sidelined areas of the city, abandoned land, and also people who are on the fringes of society as well. So Katja, can you just tell us a bit more about the projects that you are currently working on, and particularly Orten?
Orten odlar, yes. Thanks for having me, and it's been great listening to you guys. Made me think about things that we have in common. Yes, what I told Dan in my email was that obviously we have allotments like most other European countries, traditional allotments, but we also have many in what I call politically neglected suburbs. Basically the suburbs where people with low income and mostly migrants live. And the allotments there are where the things are happening. I mean, the really serious growing is going on. It's amazing. They don't look like our traditional allotments. They don't have that cottage garden type of cuteness, but they're like micro farms. They're amazing. And obviously, I think in all of Europe, and the same for Sweden, garden Sweden is very white. You know, it's very floppy straw hats and maybe young men who've just discovered it, who abandoned Netflix to do gardening. But we never see the migrants who've come to, for example, Sweden. We don't see the people from Iraq or from China or from any of these places. And when you move from one country to another, obviously you're going to miss some of the food. You can't, like, I don't know any Kurdish person who doesn't need like masses of purslane to be able to do their cooking. They need a lot, and you can't buy that in the market. You can't buy it in the supermarket. You can't buy it in the market, in the town square. So you have to grow it. But then it comes to, as you said, design. It's about design. It's about our public land, and it's about land ownership. I mean, who owns our public land and what do we do with it? And again, if you don't have a lot of money, and if you haven't lived here since, you know, the age of Vikings, like myself, you've not inherited any land either. So I think, you know, for us, it's been really important, the issue of land, of making land accessible to everybody, even if you don't have a lot of money. And as I said, I mean, the knowledge production and the food production going on here is amazing. But they're also anarchists, you know, they don't abide by our rules, you know, they build little sheds. And again, I think you were saying that about pre-designed spaces as well, like these allotment sites, well, basically the only place I can think of in Stockholm which aren't pre-designed, because everywhere else, if you walk in a park, it's a landscape architect who decided what it should look like. And my sofa is made by someone in a factory, and, you know, a designer from IKEA decided what it should look like. But on these allotment sites, it's the only place where you can actually, you know, you build something, you get, because there's no money involved, it's outside the market economy. You can't sell your plot or anything. So you don't invest a lot of money either, but you go and find pieces of scrap and you build the little shed or something like that. So it's a completely different world, and that's why it's a revolution, because it's showing that something else is possible. You know, we don't need to own the land to care for the land, because we can grow food on it and we can grow flowers on it, and it's a place to light a fire.
Can you give us one example of a place and a community which illustrates what you're describing?
One example?
Yeah.
Okay, which one should I? Okay, in terms of food production, during one season we followed an allotment here from China, who grows a lot of Chinese vegetables, and she was able to produce 860 kilos of vegetables from 100 square meter big plot. So, but she's doing Chinese biointensive farming. She knows what she's doing and she's planning it. She's an IT engineer, really, by profession. So everything is really, really planned. But I mean, that's showing what is possible if you want it, because she needs her vegetables. She can't cook otherwise. She has to have her asparagus lettuce, so she has to grow it. And I can give you plenty of other examples. But
Yeah. Can I just go back to Ron for a moment on that point that you've raised there, which is about access to land, who owns the land? And I'm wondering, has anything shifted in your part of LA, Ron, because of what you've done, what you've shown in terms of food production, what's possible. There must be the central issue here, which is access to land and ownership of land.
Yeah, access to, no, it hasn't happened in a sense. Yeah, the laws, like I said, the law's been changed where people can plant their parkway, but they're still persecuting people for using their parkway because the land basically was changed because the city got embarrassed. And so they quickly, changed the law and the guidelines are still not, perfect. But the bottom line is it's not changing that. What we need to do is change people's mind, change people's DNA of what's possible. And that's where it starts. It starts with, like what Pat said, it starts with that one tiny ass seed, that one seed. See, no one's taught us in school that seed, that one tiny seed that you can barely see, it has millennia already in it. That seed has a trillion, million, quadrillion seeds in it already. No one taught me that as a kid. So my whole thing, if we train kids to realize that this is a resource and you can't eat no damn diamonds, so what are they truly worth? It would change people, the way we look at everything. It would change when a kid see a leaf on the ground. It's like, oh, that's a resource. We don't put that in the trash can. So it's reconforming and reconfiguring our minds on what true value is and what the resources around us are. So yeah, my whole thing, if we did that, we would have a bunch of little earth warriors and they would realize that this is currency, what they're doing. So you don't have to be out there robbing and stealing and working, crazy hours, to get somebody's check. The money is around you already. The resources is around you already.
Yeah. Well, on that point, let's bring in Camille Labro of L'École Comestible. Can you pick up on that point that Ron's just made and talk about some of the work you're doing?
Sure. Of course, it's perfect transition. Thanks, Ron, for that.
You're welcome, Camille.
Because just yesterday, we were showing seeds to kids in schools and telling them how precious it was. And sometimes we cut a seed in two and show them how a tiny life is hiding inside if you give it the right conditions, heat and a little bit of water. And for sure, they changed the mindset about everything around them when they start understanding the value of a seed, for sure. But so yeah, that's what I do now. I'm actually a food journalist. We met, remember, Ron?
I remember it, Camille. Yes.
And I've always taught, spoken about food and written about food. And I'm also quite close to Alice Waters, who, of course, is a great inspiration for what I'm doing now. So because L'École Comestible is the direct translation of edible school. And it's based on the idea, of course, that she created in Berkeley, in California, where they built a vegetable garden inside a school. And that little by little, surely over time, all the classes started to, entwine the classes in the school teachings into the garden and into the kitchen. So I think this is a very powerful idea. And for the past 3 years, I've been working on this here in France, mostly in the Paris area, but it's actually apparently an idea that's time has come, because then it got picked up in Marseille in the south of France. We're launching a new branch in Nantes in the west of France, and it's and a little bit everywhere. Little seeds are popping and growing on the French territory right now.
And how does it work? Is it a formal relationship with individual schools, or how? Yeah, just explain what the setup is.
It started in a very, very empirical way. I started basically by going to the school of my kids at first and saying, hey, I have an idea. Let's do this. Let's cook, let's plant, let's grow food everywhere, because, you know, I truly believe exactly what Ron says, that there's nothing more valuable than growing food and owning your own food and creating your own delicious food rather than depending on the agro industry to make it for you, and being in this prison, in this financial prison that it can be. So I just started in one class, then two classes, and we tried different things. And then COVID arrived. And so for the time where we were confined and we couldn't go to schools, we started thinking about how to structure this idea, how to make it, how to adapt it to France too, because in America, it's a certain, it's a certain way. There's much more freedom for schools to get inspired by the model of the edible schoolyard in Berkeley than we have here. Here we have, it's very, it's like a pyramid. There's like the Éducation Nationale on top of it all, and all the public schools have to follow the same program and a certain set of things they can or cannot do. So as a nonprofit, we arrive in the schools and we propose a program that is free for them, for the school. So we go try to find money elsewhere, everywhere we can, except in the agro-industrial business. Well, yeah, I wouldn't, I can't accept money from what I'm
you can. Yeah, you can. I call it spooning the devil, Camille. It's like, I'm not having full-on sex with you, but we can cuddle, because that's where that's where the money is. They have the money, so you have to use the money,
I know, Ron, it's a big subject in my board of directors all the time. But the thing is, it's even touchier when you go into schools. Like in schools in France, I don't know how it works in the States, but in France, there's already, all these brands like, Nestle and Coca-Cola and like big consortiums of industrial, food fabricated things or already there without the teachers even knowing.
I know.
And of course, it's amazing for them because it's the public of tomorrow. It's the clients of tomorrow that they're getting used to their produce already when they're like small in the school. They don't even know what's happening to them.
It's like politicians. Politicians do the same thing.
Exactly. So my stand is, as long as I don't need this money, I will not take it.
Right.
For now, I can find money elsewhere. And I'd rather just make, assure the teachers and all the schools that I work with that it's clean, that there's no like brand behind me saying like, oh, you should, and even worse with like the seed industry, so we buy the seeds and we get the seeds from, producers, small producers that we work with and so forth. But so anyway, to answer your question, Dan, is that we have these programs that are built from the ground to the plate. So it's a series of workshops that we created for the kids for different levels in schools. It's primary school mostly. It's smaller. They're smaller than at the Edible Schoolyard in Berkeley. So it's age 4 to about 12. And so we of course plant gardens in the school. We make a rule that the garden has to be right there in the middle of the schoolyard, not somewhere in the back hidden because it's dirty and there's a compost that smells bad, because we try to tell them it doesn't smell bad, it smells super good. And so it has to be in the center so everybody cares for it. And they're all, in charge of it, and they're all responsible for it. And the moment all the kids become responsible for their garden, then they protect it too, and they discover this whole process of life from start. That's beautiful. And then
does that begin to weave its way into all of the school, all life in school, in terms of lessons?
Yes, of course, of course. We have a few pilot schools where we started from the ground up, where they didn't have even, they didn't have a garden at all. They eat bad food because you know, believe it or not, in France, in schools, the food is terrible. Whether you think, you know, otherwise, it's usually in the canteens, what they eat is usually made by Sodexo somewhere far, and it's transported, you know, refrigerated and transported. So we try to reconnect everything, every part of, you know, the food system, that so they can, you know, own it again, from planting to transforming into good food, you know.
It strikes me that from all of the stories we've heard so far, it's huge amount of individual effort. People are having to fight to get this onto the agenda, or fight to plant food in public places or places that are accessible. And it strikes me that one thing that's needed is more and more evidence to convince policymakers that this matters, that this counts, that this is important. So if we could just turn to Carrie Borgia from the Alice Waters Institute, an anthropologist who's sitting with me in the golden box, just to get a sense of, I mean, in the years that the Edible Schoolyard and Alice has been engaged with this, has that created a body of evidence that you can approach a policymaker, politician, say this works, this changes lives, this can improve diets, we need money, we need access to schools, etc. Where are we now?
Where are we? You know, it's a really hard thing because I'm coming at it from both the practical of working with Alice over the not very long. I've known her for over 20 years. I've even known Camille for 20 years, but it hasn't been that I've worked with her for that long. But as an academic who does research, one of the lacking things that we're trying to deal with right now is the proof that there is something in the, you know, when you have a garden and when the students have access to it, whether it's middle school, whether it's before that, and whether it's higher education with the Edible Education 101 at Cal, what is the proof that there is a change in behavior? So a lot of people ask us that question, and there hasn't been any significant research on that, because I think a lot of people just think like, well, of course there must be, you know, evidence that, you know, if your children are exposed to this way of doing and thinking and the value system, then of course they should make better choices. But I have to say, as a mother of a 19-year-old daughter, or my daughter was brought up eating extremely great food, she felt bad about eating bad food, and she would hide the bad food. And recently we've had that discussion about, you know, her behavior of binging. And she said, you know, Mom, you just made me feel so bad. No, I didn't even make her feel bad. It's just that we would give her these boxed lunches and these tins that were no waste tins. And she went to these schools that you couldn't do all this. You know, you're supposed to eat healthy. And she, you know, that was the way she was brought up. And then when she went to public school, she did a bit of a transition. All the other students were eating Lunchables, and so she wanted to fit in and have Lunchables, and she preferred the Lunchables over the food that I was making her. So there was this kind of an either or, which over the years I was like, no, it can be a both and. Like, you can't just have the organic. She didn't want the organic stuff and the salads and stuff, but she came to love it if I was able to kind of be flexible on the other part of what she ate, like the chicken nuggets and In-N-Out Burger. So it's interesting over, just thinking about the work that we're doing with the Alice Waters Institute and Edible Education, is you can't make the students feel bad about where they're coming from, because a lot of students don't have access to organic food and to, fresh produce. But there's a way of, again, instilling the garden, the actual experiential part of what it is to grow food that can absolutely transform.
And I think that is a really important feature, because I just last week I was traveling around a part of the UK, and there's a charity now called Taste Ed, which has been developed in the UK, or co-founded by a food writer called B. Wilson, who spent some time researching a book about how young people develop their palates, and came across, excuse me if I've got the pronunciation of this wrong, Camille, but the Saparo movement in the 1970s in France, which was there was somebody in France who was really concerned about children's palates were changing, they were becoming simplified, softer foods, sweeter foods, and so on. The idea was picked up in Scandinavia, particularly in Sweden, and then inspired B. Wilson, because what it meant is that children were put into direct contact with food and also growing projects where possible. But what it made me realize, because I visited one school where this was the perfect exemplar. So they had polytunnels, they were growing food. There were lessons in which they were listening to the sound of sugar snap peas and getting excited in their lessons. This was the favorite lessons of the teachers as well. But behind this was one head teacher who was determined to make this happen. And that's quite flimsy and fragile because the head teacher leaves and that can disappear. So do you think by taking this approach, Camille, that it guarantees that whoever the head teacher is, you are helping pupils in schools have this experience?
We have this idea to try to train as many people as possible so they can help schools in all places. We call them the edible agents, like, spies that can intervene and help out teachers who want to do something, whether in the garden, whether about food, because right now in the school programs, teachers don't learn these skills to garden or to cook. Unfortunately, I'm like an advocate for this, from the start, but it's not part of their training, of the teachers' training. So our edible agents can be activated whenever needed, so they can go in schools that want to set up a program, want to create a garden, want to create cooking workshops, and help out with like very simple tools. We use super simple material equipment. We hardly cook things. We have basically small knives, wood boards, seeds, and hands. Basically, it can be done in a very, very simple way, and so we try to universalize this as much as possible. This is basically the idea.
Yeah. Can I just turn to a different question? And here we are at Terra Madre. It's a celebration of biodiversity, all the different varieties that can be found that are endangered and disappearing. I was struck by some research the other day that's saying huge amounts of agrobiodiversity in Asia is really in the hands of gardeners, and seed banks matter, obviously. There are crop researchers and farmers doing their best in some cases, but a lot of the varieties and the diversity in the food system, I was surprised to find, backed by research, is in the hands of gardeners. So I'm just wondering, is that part of the mission? Ron, can you pick up on that? Does it matter what you grow, and do you feel any responsibility to grow this diversity that we're surrounded by here at Terra Madre?
Yes, it is not. It's not part of the mission. It's the mission. I mean, this is a revolution. We're in a war, period. Okay. And so my whole thing is, when you're in a war, do you tell the other side what you're doing? Do you tell them no? Do you tell them your plans? Hey guys, we got some rocket launchers and some grenades that we're gonna get, but at 12 o'clock and we're gonna bring you Subway sandwiches? No, you don't let them know what you're doing. And that's what's wrong with a lot of what we're doing. We tell the bad guys what we're doing, and we shouldn't. They're not telling us what they're doing. They just come out with these new products that kill you. The food is killing us. To everybody on this call, and probably everybody in the audience knows somebody that has cancer. They have cancer, dealing with cancer. Somebody that's passed from cancer. Everybody, if you do, raise your hands. I want people to see those numbers because it's ridiculous, and it has everything to do with the food. So yeah, no, that is the plan. We have to change biodiversity. We have to what it should be. And people are like, well, I'm not in the agriculture business. I'm like, do you eat food? Your ass is in the agriculture business. Do you wear clothes? Your ass is in the agriculture business. Okay, because you can vote with your dollars. You can say what's happening. And if we all get together and stop buying this this food that's killing us, they'll change it. They have to.
Patrick, does it matter what kind of lettuce you're growing?
Yeah, of course. And like, I think also like to come back, to what I was saying earlier is like this huge difference, between hybrid and heirloom seeds. And I think biodiversity is within heirloom seeds, because it's through heirloom seeds that you can reproduce endlessly seeds. And I think that people are not at all educated about like that topic. And as you said, there are seed banks, but there is also climate change, coming. And if we continue to grow with hybrid seeds, basically they will continue to cross-pollinate varieties that could potentially resist to drought or whatever. Honestly, I don't believe in that. I think the easiest answer is to reproduce your own heirloom seeds that are adapted to your growing condition, because seeds are smart, seeds are carrying a patrimony. They learn through whole day life to basically give birth to the next generation. And I think this is like exactly what we should advocate for. And biodiversity is about that. It's not about having this perfect red tomato from supermarket that look, oh, so gorgeous. And when you open it, you're like, tastes like nothing. It's also like about like different tomato calibers. It's about like different taste, different looks, shape, texture, taste. And this is like what is fascinating with biodiversity and the amazing chance that we have on this earth to have so many diversity of plants around us.
And Katja,
why are we all experiencing the same food problems around the world? Think about that. I mean, it's damn near like a form of slavery. They have us all enslaved with this poison food. Think that we're all from different places and we're all experiencing the same food calamity.
Can you answer your own question there, Ron? Why?
Why? Well, I just said it. The food, these big food producers and manufacturers, they have us enslaved. Period. It's like they're owning the seeds. They're polluting the earth. They're polluting the water, and this is legal. That's what kills me. Why is this legal? Why is it legal for you to spray my food with 1,600 pesticides that no one can pronounce? It's not needed. And when you grow your own food, you realize that it's not needed. So you thought it was, I'm glad you say, oh, I changed your mind. But you thought, okay, what's this small little plot? Yeah, it's a small little plot, but let's multiply that times 1 million. Let's multiply that times 2 million. It's not small. Just because it's not on the same plateau, the same big field, don't mean it's small. They can be small. I'd rather it be small. Why? Because it's more manageable. But imagine if you growing carrots and onions and potatoes across town, and this other guy has his front yard with fruit trees, and this person down there, they have the lettuces and everything. You can't eat all the food that you can grow. You'll be eating food all damn day. So what you need to do is share that food, trade that food, change food. And not only is that's biodiversity, but it's also in humanity. That's biodiversity in humanity. And that's where we need to get to.
And on that point, Katja, in Stockholm, because again, you're working with people from China, from Iraq, elsewhere. This is also about cultural diversity and identity as well.
Yeah, on the diversity issue, I can also tell you that we arrange seed exchanges every year, like big one in Stockholm. So I'm now growing taro from Iran and collards from Kenya and stuff like that on my plot. You're discovering new crops to grow because we get together and we swap our seeds. So that's just brilliant. We have a lot of work going on around the heirloom seeds also. But the other thing I want to say was we talked about evidence and how to change policymakers, and the food production strategy for Sweden, the sort of agricultural food production and food security, is all about export. It's all about let's produce big cash crops that we can export, not that we can eat. We have zero food security in Sweden. We'll be stuck eating carrots and apples only because That's basically it. And the rest is about export. So we have a problem that they don't see gardeners, let's call us gardeners or whatever, as people who can contribute to food security. So, and I think we need evidence there. I think also, I mean, if we had a balcony revolution, imagine all the food that we could produce if everybody was, using their balconies to produce food. So there is a lack of evidence to show that food security can come from different places. In fact, it's probably best if it comes from us, because the agricultural industry, the agro industry, I completely sympathize with not wanting to take money from them, because in Sweden and in other places in Europe too, we've had so much problem with herbicides this year and the past year as well. A herbicide called pyralids, there's aminopyralid and clopyralid and stuff like that, which they spray their fields with, and then the wheat or the whatever is eaten by the cows, and it comes out in their manure, which we use. And we've been really working on a big campaign. So it's all about, closing loops, urban loops in our gardens, and not being dependent on that agro business, which is actually polluting our gardens. Because you should have seen our gardens last year on my allotment sites. Everything was dying. The tomatoes were like deformed by this herbicide that came through the horse manure. We were thinking we're bringing in horse manure. We're not buying chemicals. We're not buying fertilizers. We're bringing in horse manure. And
how'd you figure that out? How'd they figure that out?
It was, first of all, someone else who'd been on this, Lena Israelsson, she recognized the symptoms. And then thanks to our National Association for Home Gardeners, they sent it to lab tests in Holland and Norway, where they were able to.
Wow.
And this was also found in organic fertilizers being sold in the shops. So now we have, half of Green Sweden is in uproar about this. People were, especially tomatoes. It's this big scandal. So we were, I polluted my own soil last year by, using horse manure. Imagine.
It's like hurting your own children. Like, my kids.
Exactly. We were all depressed. It is like hurting your own baby. You're like, oh, I'm feeding you with all this nice stuff.
That's
and
terrible.
then
it goes back to, you made me think of something. I tell people they didn't understand. I said, people said you are what you eat. I said, no, you are what you eats. So it's like with the cow, but they're eating this and you're using it or eating the cow. So you are what they eat. That's where it starts. And that's what you just said is perfect proof of that. That's terrible.
No.
Can we spend the last 10 minutes that we have together? Because obviously the dream here is that people listening in, watching this feed from Terra Madre, with all of you around the world, leave and are inspired to do one thing to make a difference and perhaps even join this growing revolution. But where do they begin? Can they do it by themselves? Do they need to be engaged at a community level instead? So from each of you, can I just hear your thoughts on first steps for people listening to this, watching this, who want to get involved? And you're up on the screen. So Katja, tell us first step.
I think first step obviously is to plant a seed somewhere in a pot on your balcony or in your garden or something. And I don't think it's for everyone. Not everybody likes growing things, but those of us who do,
And where do you suggest where do you suggest they find the seed or buy the seed?
Exchange, swapping with other people. Don't take it out of the tomato that you buy because, it might not be a good one. Mm-hmm. But I say talking to people and looking around and seeing if you see someone who's growing something really nice, ask them what they did.
Because in many communities there are these opportunities for seed exchanges. So perhaps
Yeah.
just get involved with that, and then perhaps even come
And
away
if you're
some
in Europe,
tips.
find an allotment, get a plot.
Yeah. Patrick, step one.
Yeah, that's a really tough question, but I will try. I will try to answer. I would say like that you have no excuse to not grow. Basically, if you even have a super small, tiny apartment, if you just only have like a windowsill, you can start to grow. And I think you know that like for me, it's not limited to space. It's not like limited to money. It's just also to how can you reuse the soil, plant a seed, and just grow something super easy on your windowsill. This is for me an act of also of revolution. And I hope that in every city now, you know, like every time I visit a city, I'm looking always up at seeing all the balconies, and I hope that there will be more and more greener balconies, because for me this is key. So yeah, plant seeds and do your compost. Do your compost to perpetuate food cycle. And when you learn about this, then you're like, okay, you're into it, and it will become your passion.
And obviously, you've had to, through trial and error, no doubt, quite a few mistakes or accidents. What are the things you learned that people could avoid because you've been through it?
Every garden is different because like depending on sun exposure, depending on the variety that you plant, depending on your climate, every garden is different. And that's why you need to make your own experience. You can learn like pretty easily some general principles, but after just put your hands into the soil, feel the plants, and follow your intuition, and try also to sometimes think with the perspective of the plants, you know, like if I was that plant, like if I do this, like would I like it, you know? And I think this is like super important to transpose yourself and talk to the plants. I talk to the plants. I sing to them.
Okay, well, just like that's exactly what our new king was criticized for 30 years ago, but now maybe he was ahead of the curve. Carrie, I mean, obviously you're seeing these big or kind of established projects Alice started. Yeah, I mean, what are your reflections on people listening who want to what's the first steps to get involved in this?
I think there's two things. I'm really practical. So I would say, and I just from my own behavior, I did two of the things that have been talked about today. One of them is with my kids, talking to their schools, like Camille, you know, it was just like I really thought it would be helpful for my daughter to be at a school with raised beds. And they had them, and then in one school they've made them. And it was just by me kind of saying, what about this? This would be a kind of really great idea. The other thing is during COVID, or was it maybe before, when did Ron, it was Ron's master class, because my husband is the gardener in the family, and he's like, what would inspire you to do anything to help me with my garden? And I was working, kind of possibly collaborating with masterclass at one point, and when I watched Ron's masterclass, I was like, oh, this could actually be fun, because for me it wasn't actually fun, because I grew up with a grandparent who had a garden, and I didn't super love working in the garden every day. But when Ron suggested like taking out the furniture and turning things into beautiful objects and planting things in it, I was like, oh, I could do that. That would be, interesting for me. So that's what I would say.
Great.
Start one in the school of your children, and then watch Ron's masterclass.
Brilliant. And Camille, you could be providing an answer here for somebody, with their own private, garden or a balcony, or perhaps this could be a school teacher listening. So what would your answer be in terms of first steps?
Well, I think I agree with what's previously said. Planting a seed, and I recommend a bean, especially because it grows very easily and very fast. And I have a personal experience with that, because growing a bean is just the first time my daughter, when she was 5, understood life, basically, when she planted one bean in the pot and realized that when it grown her size, it had 9 beans. And she said something like, oh, maman, la vie, c'est fantastique. And I realized that she had learned life. And this was one of the things that drew me towards doing what I am doing now, including a lot of other things. But so that's the first thing, planting a bean, of course, a heirloom one. And the other one, and I think, that bean actually, and it's true, was from Terra Madre. I had bought it from one of the producers at Terra Madre like the year before. And the other thing I would add, of course, intervening as much as you can with all these entities that you think you can't move, but you can. Like we just throwing, throwing the ball and saying like, no, I disagree. I think we can change it. I think we can make the canteen food better. We can make more organic vegetables available for poor communities. It's possible. It's always possible. Don't stop telling us that's impossible. And I do that all the time. And the third thing is very simply taste. With children, that's what we do every day. And just take a fruit that's in season, a beautiful vegetable that's in season, cut it in half and give it to the child. And even, of course, if it's been grown by the child, or if the child has prepared it, or, cut it in half or open it with you, he will eat it even more willingly and with pleasure. But just tasting is the beginning of this quest for biodiversity also, because heirloom vegetables are always and in season and grown locally are always better taste. And taste is something that is completely forgotten by agro-industry, by like Katja was saying, it's all about transport. Things that are meant for transport are not thought about for their flavor at all. So go back to flavor.
Brilliant. Ron, last word goes to you. And if there are any skeptics still left out there, can you change their minds? So steps to embark on to change the world and join the revolution.
Yeah. First of all, we have to change. I tell people, change your food, change your life. And first of all, we have to change our mind. But before all that, we have to change what we value, because we don't value food. We don't literally, we do, but our society as a whole, we don't value food. We need to start with that one little seed and realize that that one little seed is a miracle capsule. When you really break it down and see what's in it, like Pat said, with compost. I said compost, and compost again. It's because it lets you know who we are. When I first did compost, I thought that shit was magic, because it's all of a sudden you take this stuff that's dead, supposedly, and you take this, you got your carbons and your nitrogens, your green and your brown, you put them together, and all of a sudden you have this heat, 130, 140 degrees, and it's making sounds and it's steaming. And you're like, where did this come from? And what that let me know that it's energy. And as we always been taught, energy never dies. So it brought me it made me realize, do we die? As human beings, we're energy, we're electricity. When they bring us back to life, what do? They get 2 electric pads and put them on our chest and shoot us with pure, unadulterated electricity to bring us back to life. So what are we if we're not energy? And nobody teaches kids these lessons, because we would look at everything different. So it's what I've always said. We all need to just go out and plant some shit all over the world every day, from trees to food to flowers, and let people know. It's like, oh, I don't plant flowers. If you plant food, you plant flowers, because everything you eat at one point is a flower. And it's that. I mean, it's just changing values and what we see as important, and what they've taught us makes you successful. That you're working in these jobs and you got these titles and you want another title. Your ass will be on the hamster wheel the rest of your life. And they don't get that. But in the garden, right now, this brings me solace all day. And plus, during the pandemic, I didn't leave my place at one point for 2 months because I could eat from here.
Yeah.
And it needs to. So that's my final word is everybody just needs to go out and plant some shit. I've been saying that for years, and that's what needs to happen. Get some seeds, get your neighbors, do it collectively, start a community garden, start a garden on your terrace, plant in anything. If it can hold some soil, put a soil and some seeds in it and join this revolution, because we're under siege and we have the control to stop that.
And that is a perfect ending. So Ron, Camille, Patrick, Katja, Carrie, thank you so much. My day job is I make radio programs. I might stop that. I might buy a golden container and do this every day. It's been great fun. I've loved the conversation.
Or use your underwear drawer. And that I want that poster in the back too. So send me one.
Okay, I'll
Bring
leave that
back to
I'll
LA.
leave that to Mom. All right. Thanks everyone. Thank you
Thank
so
you guys.
much.
Oh,
And goodbye
thank you
from
for
Terra
joining.
Madre.
Take care.
Take
Thanks.
care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Brilliant. I really
So
enjoyed
I
that.
sneaked in. I'm from the University of Gastronomic
Oh,
Sciences.
I was like,
And we are very interested in this kind of project because it's, it broadens the perspective of, distance learning, because it's
Oh, yeah.
it's like different than being in front of a computer and a webcam.
definitely.
So I was just, spying on you
Yeah.
to learn a
You're really-
bit
you're really
about
good.
this,
You're a really good spy.
I love
technology.
that. You are
I just
such a
I was
good
like,
spy.
I felt the presence behind me.
I said, I mean, who is
And then I was
this?
like,
Who
what
is
is
this
that?
dude?
Who is this man?
Who's this man?
Good to meet you.
I'm a spy.
I'm responsible.
So-
I'm responsible
so-
for bringing this box.
Okay, so may I ask, just very, very briefly, how does this actually work? So you need.
Well, now this is the man.
Hello, sorry. How does this work? You need a room